To go back to school or learn from home, COVID-19 caused local families to make decisions we never expected. Whether your child is learning in person or virtually, tonight we will prepare you for the weeks ahead. The School Station presents Education in a Pandemic, only on Fox Carolina.
Good evening, I'm Cody Alcorn.
And I'm Victoria Carmen. Tonight, we're focusing a full half an hour entirely on education and the different school year children will face.
And we'll begin our coverage taking a look at in-person learning. And for some children, that school year already started. All 7 Spartanburg County districts are back in school. They return this week on hybrid plans. Now that means they attend some days in school, they do some days online at home. So we checked in with Cowpens Elementary, where the principal says they are prepared and so far things are going pretty well.
You don't realize how many things have to change, but we've made it work and hopefully it's been seamless for our parents. That was our goal. And have only had one crier in 2 days, and that was a little 5-year-old, and it wasn't because she was afraid, she just didn't want to leave mama. So things have been just wonderful. I've been very, very pleased.
Abbeville County Schools also started back this week, along with most districts in western North Carolina and northeast Georgia. Many private schools also started this week. Now, most of the upstate's start dates are staggered over the next few weeks.
In Greenville County, in-person leap days happening this week and in several other upstate districts too. School itself doesn't start until Monday, but students are attending these leap days to get prepared. With a few of these days in the books, we asked Superintendent Dr. Berg-Royster if the district noticed any areas of concern.
From the reports we've gotten, there's nothing that indicates there's some particular area that we need to work on, besides the things we know we've got to continue to focus on. And that's all these protocols that we have in place to protect our students and to protect our employees. That's an ongoing area of concern for us. We believe we have the appropriate protocols in place based on the advice we've gotten from medical and public health professionals, but it's the matter of training people and making sure they follow through with something that's not part of what would be their normal routine.
Greenville County will start the year with students attending in-person classes 1 day a week only. Dr. Royster says one of the upsides to this plan is it will allow everyone to get used to new routines like wearing masks and staying 6 feet apart while dealing with a smaller, more manageable group of students. And no matter which district your child is in, if they are returning to in-person class, there's no doubt the school and their classroom will look and feel different.
That's right. Fox Carolina education reporter Grace Runkle from The Morning News takes us to an elementary, middle, and high school in Pickens County to see how school might look for many of our children.
In Pickens County, the focus is not on keeping students apart. It's keeping them in groups.
We don't want them to be scared. We don't want them to feel institutionalized. We want them to feel loved and safe.
Liberty Primary Principal Jessica Patterson says it's more feasible and makes contact tracing easier. Her kindergartners will sanitize every morning, then pick their seat.
We want them to still be able to move and feel comfortable.
3 recess breaks a day allow for staff to sanitize frequently.
Children are children, and they're going to come within 3 feet or 6 feet of each other. We just have to give them gentle reminders and set up opportunities for them to distance. We pushed everything against the wall to allow for that expansion.
But at Liberty Middle, rooms are a little more bare.
You would not know that this is an English classroom because we had to move everything out in order to provide the space for the students.
Principal Dr. Lisa Cassidy says with desk space 6 feet apart, this room holds 20, 10 fewer than usual. Their biggest challenge, keeping the students apart.
You can't hug your best friend. You really don't need to touch the wall as you go down the hallway. Those types of things are going to be hard.
Schedules have built-in hygiene breaks and outside time, but they won't change rooms for classes, and lunch is at their desk.
That's huge for middle schoolers, and not being able to do that is very disappointing.
Only high schoolers will switch classes in Pickens County.
What we tried to design here was a traffic flow pattern, so everybody was going the same direction.
Liberty High Principal Josh Oxendine has taped off lanes and put up makeshift roundabouts.
This is what a typical day, typical classroom would look like at Liberty High. If we could do this in every room, it would be ideal.
Students have 4 classes instead of 8.
We just reduced immediately how many different cohorts a child will be.
Oxendine is already looking ahead to what classrooms could look like in better conditions.
This is 28 desks at 4 feet. I'm not okay with a crowd this big.
But for now, he's just happy to have his students back after nearly 6 months.
I want to see every student, and that's our big driving force right now.
From Pickens County, I headed over to Anderson County for our next story. School nurses will be right on the front lines when a child attending school displays potential COVID symptoms. So what happens in that situation? A school nurse in Anderson District 5 takes us through that process.
We'll have masks, we have sanitizer, cleaner.
This is Jill Chuddick's 5th year as a school nurse, and it's gearing up to be her busiest yet.
It will certainly be a juggling act.
Chuddick has to screen more than 600 students and staff at McCants Middle School in Anderson 5 for the coronavirus.
And then on top of that, we'll be taking care of students with chronic conditions such as seizure disorder.
Nurses and staff will be looking for red flags among students. If someone has one of these symptoms, like a bad cough or fever, or 2 of these, then DHEC says they must go home.
Our biggest hurdle with planning would be to make sure that we adequately isolate anyone with COVID symptoms.
DHEC requires each school create a separate space for students they suspect have COVID-19.
We will be using the non-contact thermometers this year just to keep a little better distance.
Students will stay isolated until a guardian arrives. Then Chuddick says they have to see a doctor.
We don't diagnose, we assess.
Some parents are still deciding whether their child should be at school at all. Chuddick says she's made her decision.
If a classroom is open, my 3 will be in it. I can assure you, this is a pandemic that no one in this generation has lived through, and so certainly there are going to be a lot of unknowns, and there's not a perfect solution that fits everyone.
But this nurse says the best strategy to keeping students and staff safe starts at home.
If a parent sees that a student is experiencing symptoms, the last thing we want them to do is send that child to school or send them out in public.
In Anderson, Grace Runkle, Fox Carolina News.
The DHEC says if a positive test is confirmed for a student, teacher, or staff member, the next step, tracing close contacts. Now, a close contact is defined as someone who's within 6 feet of a positive person for more than 15 minutes. Close contacts of the positive case would be told to quarantine and recommended for testing. Check with your local district or your school to find out their procedures in handling a direct contact.
And we have more on DHEC's recommendations inside of our school station section of our Fox Carolina News app. You can also find the latest education news in the section. And while you're there, we'd love for you to upload photos of your kids' first day of class, whether they're staying at home or going in person. And we have a lot of questions and concerns about COVID-19 in children. And joining us live tonight is Dr. David Brancati with Emergency MD. Thank you so much for being here late with us, Dr. Brancati.
I'm glad to be here.
And we do want to get to the first question tonight. So are COVID symptoms in children the same as adults? And how can you tell if it's really the coronavirus or maybe something else like an allergy?
Right. It's really a yes and a no answer to that. So symptoms in children can be almost identical, or there can be no symptoms whatsoever. We are dealing with that in our practice. We've had several children who have absolutely no symptoms for the entire 14 days that they might be quarantined because they have a family member, and yet their COVID swabs are coming back positive. On the flip side, we had a child who had come in and was having what looked like a heart attack that a 50-year-old person would have, and that child had severe symptoms, had EKG abnormalities, and was experiencing symptoms that I would expect to see in a 50 to a 7-year-old male who's having a heart attack. So the answer is yes, they can be similar, and no, they can be quite different.
And, talking about temperatures with children, should they be checked daily? Is that something that could lead to a COVID diagnosis? And also, when should a parent say, okay, we need to take our child in for a doctor's visit or a virtual visit to rule out COVID-19?
I think there's a lot of physicians out there. It's really a great question, but there are a lot of physicians out there that believe taking the temperature is a little bit of junk science. And I'll tell you why. The incubation period on COVID is not an hour. So if you check your child's temperature and they are positive, I can assure you that they're already COVID positive and they've had COVID and they're a carrier for several days prior to that, at least, before they mount the fever. So I think it's one tool in the toolbox, but overall it's probably one of the weaker tools that we have, just because at the point where you mount that fever, it's already probably been too late, especially if it's a Friday and the child's been in school all week. On the flip side of it is, if it's a Monday or a Tuesday and it's the first day back to school, then there could be a benefit in taking a temperature if over the last 3, 4, 5 days of incubation, the child hasn't exposed anybody at school. So again, unfortunately, it's kind of a yes and no question, but I think most physicians think it's one of the weaker tools that we have.
Now, many kids are not used to wearing a mask for, let's say, an entire school day. So any advice you have for parents and students about wearing a mask and maybe some other hygiene tips for kids when they go back to school?
Absolutely. I think it's a great question. I have both professional experience and personal experience. I have an 8-year-old, an 11-year-old, and we're in the Greenville County, one's in the Greenville County school system and one of them's in a private school system. And they're different ages. And I'll tell you, the conversation with the 11-year-old is quite different than the conversation is with the 8-year-old. It's estimated that adults touch their face sometimes 50 times a day, even in the best circumstances. So it's very difficult to teach a child to not touch their face, not touch their lips, to wear their mask, never let it slip below their nose, and to do that on hours on end. As physicians and surgeons, when we operate, you can be in a mask for 8-9 hours, and I'll tell you, it's incredibly uncomfortable for that length of time. I think any surgeon will tell you that your lips become chapped, you're rebreathing your own air. It's definitely a very uncomfortable process. And when you're a medical student, we spend an entire day on practicing how to put a mask on, put a gown on, and then not break sterile field. In other words, not touch your gown or touch your face while you're operating. And it takes quite a bit of training, and it's hard for medical students to do. So as you can imagine, even an 8-year-old son, a daughter, and an 11-year-old son of a physician, they're challenged with it as well.
Yeah, it's got to be tough, but important, of course. Thank you for this insight tonight, Dr. Brancati. We appreciate it.
We now return you to Education in a Pandemic, only on Fox Carolina, the school station.
Thousands of families across our area embarking on a new journey with virtual learning. Even most in-person plans include some form of e-learning at home.
So how do you create the best environment for your child to learn at home this year? Our parent company, Meredith Corporation, owns Parents Magazine. So we got some advice from the editor-in-chief.
Setting up a designated work area for your kids is so important. And now is the time to walk them around your house or your apartment or wherever you live and ask them, where would you like to do your work? Do you like doing it at the kitchen table near mommy? Would you like to be in your room? And let them pick out where they want to work. That will go a long way to getting them to sit there when it's time to work.
She also recommends getting your child a comfortable chair for their size. And for most of the families who choose virtual learning, everything about it will be brand new.
Yeah, so what will virtual learning look like? Fox Carolina education reporter Grace Runkle sat down with an upstate virtual teacher to find out.
Here I have my command center, so to speak.
7th grade English teacher Matt Boone won't have a long commute this fall. In fact, it's virtually non-existent.
One of the things that I was excited about for Virtual Academy was being able to set up my little studio.
He's one of the Greenville County teachers who volunteered to go virtual alongside 23,000 students. Instead of a classroom, Boone will teach from home.
I have, of course, my monitor and my computer and my web camera where I will also interact with the students and be able to talk with them one-on-one.
Boone says the virtual academy offers stability in-person school just doesn't have right now.
They'll have 5 days of school every week, and their schedule will be the same every single day.
But the question on many minds, how hard will class be?
In the spring, students got a grade based on participation. But with the virtual academy, all that is different. It is real class with real assignments, with actual grades tied to it.
Teachers weren't able to do live lessons during the spring's e-learning. That had Boone saying he'd never do it again.
But in the summer, they came up with this program called the Virtual Academy. And it's much more structured, much more involved with the students. And so I really liked that idea of having live lessons, interacting with the students live each day.
Boone will work with 3 other teachers who cover different subjects. Students will rotate between them during the day, like on a normal schedule.
We're almost our own little school.
Together, they are finding new tools to engage with students.
That'll be a huge endeavor on my part to really go and try to connect with these students that I may actually never see in real life.
The district is already increasing bandwidth after seeing their systems were nearly running at capacity.
It's not to say that there won't be bumps along the way, that there won't be trials or frustrations, because we've not done anything on this scale before.
And if all goes well this fall, Boone sees virtual academies having a permanent spot in education.
It is rigorous, that it is helpful in their daily lives. And hopefully if people think that this is going to be the easy route, hopefully their minds will be changed as time goes on.
In Greenville, Grace Runkle, Fox Carolina News.
In most districts, even the in-person school plans include some e-learning days at home. Those e-learning days are different than full-time virtual learning. We spoke with the principal of Sarah Collins Elementary to get an idea of what in-person students will see on their e-learning days. She says each student will get a set of assignments at the beginning of the day to complete. Teachers will use their planning periods to do short live sessions and answer questions.
They will be using Google Classroom to communicate back and forth, and then during their different planning times, they will actually be meeting with the teachers.
Principal Burns says the focus of the at-home lesson plans will be to supplement what they learn in the classroom. And with so many changes this school year, we asked clinical psychologist Dr. Caitlin McClear with Vive Greenville to join us tonight. Thank you for being here, Dr. McClear.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, Dr. McClear, you know, this year is going to be like any other we face. We're talking for parents, for faculty at schools, for the children. And talking about anxiety, it seems like adults are going to have more anxiety than ever, not only dealing with COVID-19, the financial strain, but also dealing with, you know, school, having some have to teach their kids, having to deal with these schedules that are unlike any other we've seen. What advice do you have for parents out there who I think first have to deal with their anxiety before they can actually help their children's anxiety?
You're absolutely right, and that's the first thing I always tell parents is that you have to be taking care of yourself and making sure you're in a great place before you can help your kids, because kids really look to parents for how to handle anxiety and other, strong emotions. So I've been telling parents a lot to really focus on what's in their control, what we know, what we can plan for, to make a plan with the understanding that things may change or likely will change. To practice self-care, to give themselves permission to not focus on COVID and all the anxiety around COVID and financial stress and strain and all of that, but to find some time for themselves still to do things they enjoy. And we know that is a huge piece of handling anxiety. And then also knowing when to ask for help and when to turn to others for support. I think all of those things are really essential for parents and any adult who's handling anxiety related to COVID.
And Dr. McClear, how important is socializing for children during this time? I mean, at school, they have recess, they have a lot of time for interaction in between hallways, but when you're learning virtually, it's going to be a little bit different.
Definitely. And we know socialization is so much more than just those interpersonal interactions. It's really how we learn how to be citizens in our society. So we definitely still encourage parents to try for virtual interactions. I know they're not the same. Also, if it's feasible and comfortable for your family to do outdoor hangouts or play dates or things like that. But there's also a lot of value from just some of the everyday family activities. You can use siblings as ways of learning how to handle conflict, negotiate, just learn how to read other people's emotions. You can also use pets to help kids develop empathy and responsibility. So there's a lot of opportunities within the family setting that don't involve peers. And then the great thing about kids is they're so resilient and they're really adaptable that they can take these lessons they learn during this time when you're really with family and very close friends or relatives, that to apply that to classmates and when they do go back to school.
Well, Dr. McClear, thanks so much for staying up with us tonight here, and we really appreciate your insight. I think it's one of those things that parents just have to go on the flow with this, kind of take it each day at a time. So again, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Hey there, I'm Aaron Cheslock outside the studio to make sure we are properly social distancing. Now, will the preps play? That's the big question for all the student athletes in our area. Right now, all the athletes and all the seasons are good to go. Everything's on schedule, but South Carolina High School League Commissioner Jerome Singleton has made it clear everyone needs to be flexible as things could change on a dime. He calls all these start dates very much a moving target. But let's get you up to speed on what the fall sports schedule looks like right now. Girls golf, swim, and girls tennis all got started on Monday. Their first contest is set to get going on the 31st. Cross country and volleyball begin this upcoming Monday, the 24th. Their regular season begins on September 7th. Competitive cheer with the latest start. First practice on the 8th. First competition on October 13th. And football starts practice the same day. The opening week of the season tentatively set for September 25th. And we will start with football, as it figures to be the toughest to pull off during a pandemic. In Spartanburg County, Burns had a brief stoppage to workouts, but continues in phase 1.5, conditioning with helmets, small group work. Their motto this year, faith over fear. Head coach Reggie Shaw says this team's been receptive to the protocols in place.
Just talked about controlling what we can, individually being in the best shape you have been, doing things on your own, and then the knowledge base, taking this off time to really study the playbook and know it so that when you can get on the field, you can execute. And so just try to look at different ways to accomplish the same task.
Over to Anderson now, where Westside's Scott Early's embracing the protocols due to the pandemic, saying small groups and individual work's a kind of a throwback for him. He doesn't mind it one bit. Early notes that they've taken all the safety procedures very seriously, adding not just Westside, but the entire district should get a lot of credit.
They've done everything they can do to keep us safe and provide us with the financial means it takes to do so. So, we're in a wonderful athletic utopia here, and we're all blessed to be here. We're just glad that we can get our kids back out here and do what we love to do.
Over to Greenville, where Scoot Watson, unlike Shaw and Early, taking over a program as a first-year head coach during a pandemic, no less. Couple that with the county shutting down voluntary workouts for weeks. Watson says since they've returned, he's been pleased with the turnout at Mann and wants to make sure that they make up for lost time on the field, both physically and mentally.
We're just going to continue to push them, continue to encourage them. We've got some new coaches, so the main thing we're focusing on right now is technique, fundamentals, and just having a positive attitude.
From football to volleyball, where Pickens touts a long-standing tradition of success. And this year, despite changes in the schedule, the school's schedule, and contact, COVID protocols impacting their preps this summer indeed. But they've adjusted well and remain laser-focused on winning.
Our girls are ready for it to not be any different. They are they're hungry. We're ready for our new region. They've conquered our phase 1 and our COVID-19 phases, so we're really not handling it any different.
Meanwhile, the reigning state champion BHP cheer team's happy to be back on the mat. Right now, they stay socially distanced on the mat, something they're obviously pretty good at as cheerleaders. No stunts at this point, however, so they can avoid close contact. They don't wear masks while tumbling, but are happy to wear them off the mat if that means they can get back out there cheering again soon.
I mean, everybody is pretty good. We haven't really had to correct anybody or anything. Everybody's really good about social distancing and staying on top of that. We just want to do what's best for everybody, and so we can really get back to how it's supposed to be.
like football, because of the close contact, there will be the last to start practice on September 8th. That's a look at sports, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, Tori and Cody are going to tell you about the one thing you might want to have in your home this upcoming school year.
Well, it is a fact this school year will be different for pretty much every family.
Yes, regardless of whether your child is doing virtual or in-person learning, the editor-in-chief of Parents Magazine recommends every family consider buying one item to keep everybody on track.
I think the essential school supply for every family, whether you go back or whether you do it at home, is a huge whiteboard where you are writing out the schedule and how it's going to go so that your kids and you have a visual reminder of what the order of events is going to be.
Well, there you have it. Parents is owned by the Meredith Corporation, which owns Fox Carolina. And remember to wake up with the morning news to get your family started every school day. We're on at 4:30 till 9 every day.
And don't forget to download our free Fox Carolina News app. We have a special section because we are the school station. We'll see you back here tomorrow starting first thing in the morning at 4:30.